How's your week going so far? My name is Alicia.
I'm Nicole.
Why don't we take a little time away from the hustle and bustle of adulting and let's indulge our curiosities just for a bit and talk about killers, psychos, and the unexplained.
Today we are venturing to California to talk about Randy Stephen Kraft and Dorthea Helen Puente.
Welcome to California, home of Dorthea Helen Puente, who ran a boarding house in Sacramento in the 1980s. She decided to murder the elderly and disabled so she could steal their social security check.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, kill the old people and steal all their stuff. So 9 murders was the total that she ended up being charged with. What a winner, right? Dorthea Puente was born Dorthea Helen Gray on January 9th, 1929 in Redlands, California, to Trudy May and Jesse James Gray. Both of her parents were alcoholics, and Dorthea's father repeatedly threatened to kill himself in front of his children. He did end up dying of tuberculosis in 1937. Her mother, Trudy, was a sex worker and ended up losing custody of her children in 1938 and then died in a motorcycle accident by the end of the year. So pretty much her father passed away in 1937. Her mom lost custody in 1938. And Dorthea and her siblings were subsequently sent to like an orphanage where she was sexually abused.
Oh,
In 1945, 16-year-old Dorthea married her first husband, a soldier named Fred McFall, who had just returned from World War II. They had 2 daughters between 1946 and 1948. Dorthea did end up sending one to live with relatives in Sacramento, and the other one she placed in adoption. I mean, since she had such a great experience growing up, she might as well put her own children through the same. I guess she had also had a miscarriage during this time. I mean, but she didn't want the other 2, so I guess that was probably for the better. I'm not really sure why she couldn't like raise her own children, but apparently that's what she did. Hopefully it was better for them since Dorthea is clearly not a great human. Then in 1948, Dorthea was arrested for purchasing women's accessories using forged checks. She did end up pleading guilty to 2 counts of forgery, serving 4 months in jail and 3 years probation. After this, her first husband did decide to leave her. And then in 1952, Dorthea decided to change her name and her whole persona. So she's now calling herself Teya Singawela Niyarda and says she's a Muslim woman of Egyptian and Israeli descent. So,
uh,
new year,
okay.
new. And she was convincing enough because she did secure herself a second husband, a merchant seaman named Axel Bren Johansson. So apparently their marriage was quite turbulent, and Axel would spend a lot of time like out at sea. Well, while Axel was away, Dorthea surely did play. She would invite many men to their house, and she also enjoyed like gambling, and poor Axel's money would be gone. Axel did try and stand by her, even after in 1960, Dorthea was arrested for operating a bookkeeping firm as a front for a brothel. She did end up spending 90 days in Sacramento County Jail for this sexual endeavor. Axel was still hanging on, though. 1961, he did have Dorthea briefly committed to DeWitt State Hospital after like a binge drinking episode. She was like lying, all the criminal behavior, suicide attempts. While there, she was diagnosed by doctors as a pathological liar with an unstable personality. Surprise!
Was anyone surprised at this point?
Axel and Dorthea did end up divorcing in 1966. I mean, he stuck it out. He tried. He did. I mean, the man gave it a good go, about 14 years. Dorthea would continue to use Axel's name for some time following their separation, though. She assumed the identity of Sharon Johansson now, hiding her past delinquent behaviors by portraying herself as a devout Christian woman, establishing her reputation as a caregiver, providing young women with a sanctuary from poverty and abuse for free. In 1968, Dorthea married Roberto Jose Puente. This was her third marriage, and it lasted about 16 months, separating due to Dorthea claiming domestic abuse. Apparently, the divorce couldn't be served due to Roberto fleeing back to Mexico. He apparently came back at some point because the two did like continue to have some relations, and Dorthea did end up filing a restraining order at some point. Then in 1973, the divorce was finally finalized, but she did keep his name for over 20 years afterwards, though. So she remained Dorthea Puente. Following her divorce, Dorthea focused on running a boarding house located near 15th and F Streets in Sacramento, establishing herself as a genuine resource to the community to aid alcoholics, homeless people, and the mentally ill. She would hold Alcoholic Anonymous meetings and even assisted individuals to sign up to receive Social Security benefits. She created like a public image as like a respectable older matron, putting on like vintage clothing, wearing large like eyeglasses, and she let her hair stay gray. She didn't dye it. She wanted to look like she was, an older, responsible human. She had also like established herself as a respectable member of the local Hispanic community, Puente, funding charities, scholarships, and radio programs. She eventually met and married her fourth husband, Pedro Angel Montavo, but I guess it only lasted about a week. So she never really like had anything with his name in it, but yeah. So a week she had a fourth husband.
1 week?
Yeah. On December 21st, 1978, I guess some folks did some digging, and Dorthea was convicted of illegally cashing 34 state and federal checks that belonged to her tenant. She was given 5 years probation in order to pay back $4,000 in restitution. So after Dorthea laid low for a couple years, she decided on a new scheme. On January 16th, 1982, Dorthea met Malcolm McKenzie, who was 74, in a bar, accompanied him back to his apartment. He later reported that Dorthea had drugged him and robbed him of like a coin collection, watches, and other jewelry, including a diamond ring that had belonged to his mother, which she removed from his finger while he was passed out. On April 28th, 1982, Ruth Monroe, 61, who was staying at Dorthea's home, was found dead due to respiratory depression caused by a massive overdose of codeine. Ruth was reportedly in good health when she had arrived at Dorthea's home. However, sometime she had told a friend, "I'm so sick, I feel like I'm going to die." Ruth's death. Yeah, so she was feeling like when she arrived, she was healthy. And then while she was there, she was feeling like, I haven't been feeling good. Like something's wrong with me. I think I'm dying. Ruth's death was originally ruled as an undetermined overdose. Later on, it'll be classified as a homicide. On May 16th, 1982, Dorthea visited Dorothy Osborne, who was 49, in her home, made her a drink, and later Dorothy said she found checks, credit cards, and other items like missing from her house after Dorthea's visit. On July 1982, Dorthea was again found out and was convicted of 3 grand theft charges. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison. While she was incarcerated, she began corresponding with Everson Theodore Gilmouth, who was a 77-year-old retiree from Oregon. At the beginning of September in 1985, Everson came to Sacramento with his truck and trailer and arrived at Dorthea's boarding house. On September 9th, 1985, after serving only about half of her sentence, Dorthea was released from prison, whereupon she was picked up by her new man, Everson. In October 1985, Dorthea wrote to Everson's sister informing her that she and Everson were to be married on November 2nd. Dorthea hired a handyman to remodel, and she asked him to build a 6-foot by 30-inch by 30-inch storage box. She agreed to give Everson's truck and $800 as payment. The day after the box was completed, the handyman returned to find it nailed shut. Dorthea asked him to move the box, which now weighed approximately 300 pounds, to a storage location. But on the way to the storage location, she decided just to like dump the box in a river. Why the man wouldn't be like, that's weird. You had me build a specific box. Had me
For storage.
That's now 300-ish pounds, but we just gonna dump it in the river. That's fine.
That's not suspicious at all.
Not at all. On January 1st, 1986, a fisherman did discover this suspicious box along the Sacramento River, and he notified authorities. Who, guess what?
Wait, he helped her dump the box and didn't tell police?
No. He just was like, I got me a truck and $800. Okay, see you later, Dorothy.
Okay, so the fisherman discovers it.
Yeah, so fisherman, he just hanging out, sees the suspicious box and's like, I guess I should tell the police. And he did, he does. Guess what's inside? A human body. Surprise. They didn't even figure out it was Everson until December 28th, 1998. So this is like 13 years later by the time they even figure out who this body in this box in the river. His severely decomposed body was wrapped in numerous plastic bags and covered with bed sheets held in place by electrical tape. Mothballs and blue toilet deodorizer were also found inside the box. I guess she didn't want it to stink. It was later discovered that ever since death, Dorthea stayed in contact with his sister, mailing her fake letters and cards addressed from her brother just to keep his sister thinking that everything was fine. Like, yeah, I'm alive. Don't come looking for me. I'm cool.
Right. Right.
Dorthea had also forged Everson's signature on his truck's title and was continuing to cash all of his benefits until July 1986. So in the fall of 1986, Betty Mae Palmer, 78, arrived at Dorthea's boarding house on October 14th, 1986. Dorthea actually got a California ID with Betty's name, but her own picture on it so she could cash Betty's Social Security check. So she's like, this is my ID. It says Betty, but it's me. It's me.
Right.
In November 1988, Betty's partially dismembered body was discovered in a shallow hole in Dorthea's front yard, but not before she ended up obtaining like over $7,000 worth of her benefit money. Toxicology reports that the body revealed the presence of multiple medications. She was finally identified January 24th, 1989, so 3 years later, through comparison of previous medical x-rays. On October 21st, 1986, Dorthea had a notary come to the hospital room of Leona Carpenter, 78, who had suffered an overdose of flurazepam. So flurazepam is a pretty strong medication that helps people sleep. Dorthea was given power of attorney over Leona and began cashing all of her Social Security checks just a few days later. When she was released from the hospital, Leona wanted to go again and live with Dorthea, and in February 1987, she disappeared. In November 1988, her body was found in Dorthea's yard, so about a year later. February, March, April. Yeah, about a year later. Toxicology reports of Carpenter's brain tissue revealed the presence of codeine, diazepam, and flurazepam. Again, a whole lot of downers. Then in February 1987, James Galpo, 67, moved into Dorthea's home. James's body was buried under a gazebo in Dorothy's yard and was found in November 1988. Again, toxicology testing of Gallup's brain and liver revealed all the medication. Then on July 1987, Eugene Gamble, 58, was found dead of an apparent suicide, having overdosed. Dorthea, who was his landlady, told investigators that he had a history of suicide attempts, and apparently it was just left at that.
Oh.
On October 2nd, 1987, Fairway Martin, 61, was sent to live with Dorthea. She started forging Vera's Social Security check shortly after that, stealing over $7,000 from her. And then when Vera didn't call her daughter on her birthday, which I guess she did every single year, her daughter became concerned. In November 1988, Martin's body was found buried under a metal shed in Dorthea's yard. Toxicology reports of her brain and liver again revealed all the medications. October 21st, 1987, Dorthea Miller, 65, came to live with Dorthea. Just weeks after her arrival, she was missing, but Dorthea kept cashing her checks, receiving over $11,000 from, poor Dorothy. Then her body was discovered under a slab of concrete. So basically, like all this time, 1985, 1986, 1987, she just, people come in, they disappear. They come in, they disappear. And then in November of 1988, when they did this massive, digging around in her yard, all the bodies.
All the bodies are found, and she continued to cash the checks.
Yep. On November 29th, 1987, Brenda Turijo sent a letter to the Social Security office in Sacramento, and she accused Dorthea of stealing her Social Security checks. So apparently Brenda had shared a jail cell in 1982 with Dorthea, and then after, when she got out of jail, she ended up moving into Dorthea's boarding house.
Okay.
And Dorthea helped her, file Social Security benefits and then started stealing from her. In February 1988, Alvaro Bert Gonzalez Montoya, 51, arrived at Puente's home. The last time he was seen was August 24th. Dorthea was telling everybody Alvaro moved back to Mexico. Then sometime later, Alvaro's body was buried adjacent to Leona's body. Toxicology again, all the medications. March 9th, 1988, Benjamin Fick, 55, was sent to live with Dorthea. His body would later be found in a hole covered in concrete in Dorthea's yard, wrapped in knotted bedspread secured with duct tape. and just covered with like a blue absorbent pads. Again, toxicology, all the drugs. November 17th, Dorothea was formally charged with the murder of Alvaro Montoya. And then on October 19th, 1992, a judge ruled that Dorothea would face all 9 murder counts. So basically, after Benjamin, I think. Yeah, Benjamin was the last. So after Benjamin, people started getting really suspicious, and they're like, "Something's going on with this boarding house. Everyone that goes in don't come out." And
Well,
but yeah,
in 9 years, like
yeah.
9 people, where is she putting 9 people?
Well, they appeared like they were living there, and she was caring for them because their monies keep getting cashed, So they're being cared for is what it's appearing on paper. But so then Dorothea's trial did begin on February 9th, 1993. By the conclusion of the trial, 156 witnesses did testify. More than 3,100 exhibits had been submitted, and over 22 pages of transcripts were recorded. This was an extensive trial. After deliberating for 11 days, the jury came back deadlocked on all 9 counts of murder and asked for further instruction. The next day, Verja ordered the jury to resume their efforts to break the deadlock. And then on October 26, 1993, Dorothea was convicted on 3 counts of murder: Benjamin Fick, Leona Carpenter, and Dorothy Miller. The jury, after deliberating for another 35 days, still remained deadlocked on the other 6 cases for Ruth Monroe, Everson Theodore Gilmouth, Betty Mae Palmer, James Gallup, Vera Faye Martin, and Elvira Gonzalez Montoya. After some back and forth, Dorothea did end up getting sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. So she did end up spending the rest of her life in prison, and she died on March 27th, 2011 from natural causes. She got to live till she was 82, bringing this awful case to an end.
Of course, she got to live till she was 82.
Yeah. I just don't know. How can you be deadlocked? There was bodies on bodies on bodies. Come on, yeah, you did it. They're all in your yard buried.
They were taking each case individually and saying, instead of going, she definitely killed all these people.
They were buried in her yard. Who else did that?
Yeah, I let the neighbor bury something in my yard.
Yeah, along with a big ass suspicious, box in the river.
The dead neighbor.
Yeah, the dead neighbor, exactly.
Randy Stephen Kraft, aka the Scorecard Killer, aka the Southern California Strangler, aka the Freeway Killer. Lots of annotations. You will see why in a second. Was born March 19th, 1945 to Opal and Harold Kraft. Kraft was the fourth child and only son. During World War II, the family moved to California for work. Kraft's family lived modestly, and his mom worked outside the home when needed. So she didn't always, but like if they needed to catch up on something or they wanted to save money for something or whatever it was, she would work sometimes outside the home. But they lived they weren't poor, they weren't rich. It was a very middle income life there. Kraft's mom still found time for the kids, unlike his father, who seldom attended social gatherings. Kraft was doted on by his 3 older sisters and his mother. And in 1948, the family moved to Orange County and joined Westminster First Presbyterian Church. Kraft's intelligence was noted by classmates and teachers and was moved to accelerated classes in 1957. So he's very intelligent, and they've now moved him into, I don't know what you would call it nowadays. It wasn't accelerated.
Gifted.
Yeah, gifted classes. By adolescence, Kraft liked politics and inspired to become a U.S. Senator. Kraft dated a few girls, but some classmates suspected he was gay. Kraft later says he knew in high school he was gay, but kept it a secret. I mean, we're talking 50s. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, you're not coming out the closet. It's not like it is today where it's people don't really come out of the closet. It's natural conversation with your parents. In 1963, he graduated 10th out of 390 students. That's a huge class.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and to be 10th is a big deal. That fall, he started college. In the first year of college, Kraft enrolled in the Reserve Officers Training, Well, that's like that weekend training stuff they have. By the second year of college, he had his first homosexual relationship. Kraft also began as a bartender in a place that catered to gay clientele, and Kraft was known to have casual sex with hustlers. In 1966, Kraft was arrested for propositioning a police officer. It was his first offense, and he had no record, so no charges were filed. Don't proposition the police. I mean,
No record or not, you did it.
during his senior year, however, Kraft became lackadaisical and started drinking, taking drugs, and regularly attending all-night gambling sessions with other students. Uh-oh. We've now gone into the downward spiral. Kraft flunked his econ class and had to wait 8 months to graduate. He did graduate in 1968 with a BA in econ. 4 months later, he joined the Air Force. His job was to supervise the painting of an aircraft. I don't know how difficult that would be, but it doesn't sound like a hard job at all. He did well and rose to airman first class and supervising manager. Kraft finally comes out to his family, and his dad flies into a rage, and his mom understood but didn't approve. Ultimately, his family did end up accepting his sexuality, and he remained in contact with his parents and siblings. I mean, that
I mean,
people
at
don't
least.
do that. At least
Hmm.
they're talking to you. In 1969, Kraft announced his sexuality to his superiors, and he was discharged. They list it as medical. After his discharge, he moved back home and started to bartend again. In March of 1970 is Kraft's first known victim, a sexual assault of a 13-year-old boy.
Ew.
Joseph Fancher had told Kraft that he had run away, and Kraft invited him to his apartment, promising the boy could live with him and offered him sex with a woman he knew. Like, hey, come back to my apartment. I got this girl, she'll sleep with you. Like,
Mm.
okay. Shouldn't be offering that to any 13-year-old, but a 13-year-old boy is probably going to take you up on it, right? Joseph agreed and followed Kraft home, where he was drugged, beaten, and repeatedly sexually assaulted. Hours later, Joseph escaped when Kraft went back to work. Someone else found Joseph and was alarmed by his being drugged, heaved, and called him an ambulance. Joseph had talked to the police while at the hospital about being drugged and beaten, but told no one about the sexual assault. So
Embarrassed.
you're at the hospital where you can get help and you don't tell anybody.
But 13-year-old boy, embarrassed.
He probably was, yeah. So, because Joseph told police he willingly took the pills, in the search they did of the apartment with the roommates' help and no warrant, no charges were filed. Kraft found new work in 1971 as a forklift driver in Huntington Beach. He had also enrolled in college 2 years earlier to further his education by majoring in education. There, Kraft met Jeff Graves and they began a relationship. Between 1971 and 83, Kraft is believed to have killed 67 people. All suspected victims were males between the ages of 13 and 35. Most of these were between 19 to 25 years old. Kraft was eventually charged with and convicted of 16 of these homicides. Many victims were members of the United States Marine Corps, and most of them had high levels of alcohol and tranquilizers, indicating they were probably unconscious when they were abused and killed. Kraft's victims were lured into his car with promises of a lift or alcohol. He piled them with alcohol, drugs, and then he bound, tortured, and sexually abused them before they were killed by strangulation, asphyxiation, or bludgeoning. Some victims had ingested lethal doses of pharmaceuticals. One victim was stabbed to death. Most victims were discarded alongside or close to various freeways in Southern California. Photographs show several of his victims were at his home before their murder. Many of the victims were burned with a car cigarette lighter, usually around the genitals, face, chest, and several had extensive blunt force trauma to the face and head.
Oh.
Several victims had foreign objects found in their rectums, while others had suffered mutilation and dismemberment. Most victims were murdered in California, a few in Oregon, and two in Michigan. Okay, So now I just told you
A lot.
a
Oh my.
lot of information that was disturbing. Now we're going to go back and actually talk about the people, not what was specifically done to each person because it would take a really long time. So, the first suspected murder victim was October 5th, 1971. Police found the nude body of a 30-year-old Long Beach resident, Wayne Joseph Duquette, who was discarded close to the Ortega Highway. He was a bartender at a gay bar and he had last been seen alive on September 20th. His body was so decayed that it destroyed any foul play signs on the body, and his death was considered acute alcohol poisoning. However, Kraft's first victim on his scorecard said stable, the bar where Wayne had worked at. 15 months later, Kraft killed a 20-year-old Marine named Edward Daniel Moore. Edward was last seen leaving the barracks on December 24th, 1972. His body was found beside 405 freeway 2 days later. They believe he had been pushed from a moving vehicle. Autopsy showed he had been bound at the wrists and ankles and beaten with a blunt instrument to the face before being strangled. His body was covered in various bite marks, and a sock had been forced into his rectum. 6 weeks later, on February 6, 1973, the body of an unidentified male between the ages of 17 and 25. The victim had been strangled, and a sock had been placed in his rectum. Two
Are the
months.
makeshift condoms?
Say it again.
Are the socks like makeshift condoms? That's what it a sock?
There's a lot of times that socks are found in the rectum, so that could be the
Hmm.
case. It does not say that they think that's what it's for, so maybe,
Hmm.
but I'm unsure. 2 months later, on April 14th, the body of 17-year-old Kevin Clark Bailey. Kevin had been emasculated, sodomized prior to his murder. By July 28th, two more victims were found: an unidentified youth whose dismembered body was found in Wilmington on April 22nd, a 20-year-old named Ronnie Jean Wiebe, whose strangled body was discovered beside a ramp on the 405. On July 30th, 2 days after he had disappeared, Kraft is known to have killed at least once more in 1973. The victim was 23-year-old Vincent Cruz Messa's body, who was found December 29th. One of the victim's socks was found in his rectum. Vincent's hands had been severed from his body and were never found. The reason that they could even attach some of these victims to Kraft was because of this scorecard. This is how he became the scorecard killer, is because he was writing on literally on a index card like dates and just like places he had been, but these names, they weren't names necessarily. It would be like weird indications of places he had been, something about the victim maybe. It would just be like the bar name or the place the people had worked. He had gotten to know them enough to know like some general basic information. That's how they know that was the end of his victim line in 1973, if that helps clarify that information for everybody.
I
So
mean,
by
you know,
what?
I took out like 60 something people, but
I mean, I guess, yeah, if you're going to kill 67 people, you need a note card to keep track, right? By November 1974, five more victims were found. 20-year-old Malcolm Eugene Little and 19-year-old James Dale Reeves had both been found along a freeway with foreign objects inserted into their bodies. So it's not always a sock. So that was the other reason I don't know if it necessary. I think it was just like a thing, like his. I don't want to call it a tagline because it's not a tagline, but like sometimes this is how you connect victims and killers is because they're doing all the same things.
don't they call card?
What?
Calling card?
Yeah, that word, calling card. Thank you. Us moms got to help each other with this mom brain crap. It's real.
For real.
Okay. 18-year-old Marine Roger Edward Dickerson, another victim, bore evidence of bite marks, much like several others. On January 3rd, 1975, Kraft abducted and murdered a 17-year-old high school student named John William Lieras. John was last seen boarding a bus, and his strangled body was found the following day discarded with a foreign object protruding from his anus. The police believe two people carried the body onto the beach. 2 weeks later, January 17th, the body of 21-year-old Craig Joantis was found strangled to death with a length of string. So, like, he strangled him with some string. By January 1975, a total of 14 victims had been linked to the same killer, their bodies having been found discarded across 4 separate counties over the 3 previous years. All victims had been Caucasian males with similar physical characteristics. On January 24th, homicide investigators from several jurisdictions in Southern California convened in Orange County to discuss their progress in the hunt for the unknown killer. So they're realizing this guy's all over the place, okay? Kraft had profiled as an individual as a methodical, organized lust killer of above average intelligence who exhibited an indifference to the interests and welfare of society. So this is what they've profiled him as. Obviously, these are true. Some believed it was multiple killers. Some believe they were in the military, since tissue paper was found in several victims' noses, a procedure used in the military. And they think that's why socks were found in several victims' anuses to prevent purging while transporting the bodies. So, like,
He didn't want him to poop while he was transporting them.
yeah, he didn't want them to poop while he was transporting them. So that's why when you asked earlier, I was like, I don't think that was the reason.
Literally to plug it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
However, there were no solid suspects. On the evening of March 29th, 1975, Kraft lured 2 youths, Keith Crotwell and Kent May. Kraft gave them beer and Valium. Kraft drove around aimlessly. Kent later recalls feeling catatonic as a result of the Valium and alcohol before he passed out. In a parking lot where the youths were last seen, observed a black and white Mustang open the passenger door and push the unconscious Kent out onto the pavement. The driver then sped away. They noticed Keith slumped against the unknown driver's shoulder. On May 8th, Keith's skull was found, and the remainder of his body 6 months later. They suspected that the murderer was a patron of a Belmont Shore gay bar. So the two friends combed the neighborhood for the Mustang. When they found it, they wrote down the license plate number and gave the info to the police, who discovered the car belonged to Randy Kraft. So now they might have a suspect because they did witness him pushing the kid out of the car, right? And the friends were so disturbed by what happened to their other friend that they hunt down this car in town and get the license plate number. I would be scared too shitless, to go
Yeah.
looking for this license plate number. Long Beach police end up questioning Kraft about Cotwell's abduction and murder. Kraft denied knowing Cotwell or May. The police didn't believe him and come in for more questioning. Kraft then changed his story and said he did meet them and persuaded them to drink and take Valium with him. Then he dropped off May and drove with Cotwell to a side road where the car got stuck. So he left Crotwell in the car walking to a gas station. When he returned, he claims Crotwell disappeared. Kraft's roommate did say he called that night about car trouble. However, the police tried to charge Kraft anyway, and the DA refused, saying Crotwell died of accidental drowning. Wait, wasn't his body dismembered?
Yeah.
Okay.
Accidental drowning. Heads full of.
Kraft is not to have known to have killed anyone between this murder and December 31st. So he took a break. When he abducted 22-year-old Mark Hall, they drove to a remote canyon where Hall was bound to a tree. Autopsy showed asphyxiation caused by leaves and earth found lodged deep in his trachea. Hall was also sodomized and emasculated with the severed genitals inserted into his rectum.
Several? Where did these
No,
come
no,
from?
severed. Severed.
Oh, I thought you said several. I was like, did he was he saving the others to put in one new?
God, I hope not. Uh, no, he cut off his own genitalia and inserted it into his own rectum. Hall's chest, scrotum, nose, and cheeks had been burned with an automobile cigarette lighter. You know, the old style push-in ones we don't have no more. Which was also used to destroy his eyes. I I can't even imagine having your eyes burnt with a cigarette lighter out of a car.
Awful.
A
That's
broken bottle was used to cause lacerations on his legs. Hall remained alive for most of the ordeal. This is deemed to be Kraft's most brutal murder.
the cigarette lighter to the eyes. You know, that's one of those like bizarre like thoughts that you have sometimes that would be like the most awful thing. Ugh,
The fact that he was alive for most of, so a lot of his other victims were so sedated that they potentially didn't really know what was going on or didn't have any idea what was going on. Where this kid knew and was alive for most of it. Kraft ended his relationship with Graves by 1976 and shortly thereafter began a relationship with a 19-year-old Jeff Sealing. Neither man remained monogamous but claimed they would remain permanent. They're in a permanent relationship, but they're sleeping with other people and they've agreed that this is what they want to do. Sealing told police they would frequently pick up and proposition hitchhikers to have threesomes with them. Sealing was adamant that Kraft had never been violent to any of them or him. This relationship is to be believed the reason for his lull in killings. So they think that's why there was such a big break between killings is because he's with this new guy Jeff and they're picking up hitchhikers, which he likes to do, and they're propositioning them to have three ways, which is fulfilling whatever sick need that he has. And so they think this is why there was a lull. December 1976, we know Kraft killed Paul Joseph Fuchs, even though the body was never recovered because he is listed on the scorecard. So he's on the scorecard. They never found his, who knows what happened to it. Then Kraft took a 16-month break. Police knew in 1978 that even though they caught Patrick Kearney for several murders, that they varied so much, another killer must be on the loose. So they've now been hunting two separate serial killers, and they know this. In April 1978, Kraft began his killings again. However, I've taken so much time to get here, I will start listing them with less info. So on April 16th, 1978, 18-year-old Marine Scott Michael Hughes, June 11th, 23-year-old Ronald Gerald Young, 8 days later, 20-year-old Marine Richard Allen Keith, believed to be the one on the scorecard named Marine Carson, since he was from the city Carson. So that's what I'm saying, like weird indentations on the scorecard. 3 weeks later, 23-year-old hitchhiker Keith Arthur Klingbeil, he was found still alive but died shortly after. Can't imagine being still alive. 2 months later, September 29th, 1978, 20-year-old Richard Anthony Crosby. The last murder of 1978 is known to be 21-year-old Michael Joseph Inderbetten in November of that year. Then Kraft takes a break until June 6, 1979. 20-year-old Marine Donnie Harold Cressel. 2 months later, August 29th, 21-year-old Keith Anthony Jackson. They only ever found Jackson's head, torso, and left leg.
just the
Two
left,
weeks. What'd you say?
just the left leg.
Just the left leg. 2 weeks later, September 14th, 19-year-old Gregory Wallace Jolly. His possessions were later found in Kraft's home. November 24th, 15-year-old Jeffrey Sayer. February 18th, 1980, 19-year-old Marine Mark Allen Marsh. Then in the summer of 1980, Kraft travels to Oregon on an extended business trip where he murdered two more people. September 3rd, 19-year-old Marine Robert Longings And April 10th, 1981, 17-year-old Michael Cluck. Same day, Kraft received hospital treatment for a bruised foot. So he murders two people and then goes to the hospital for a bruised foot.
I hurt my foot.
4 months later, 17-year-old Christopher Allen Williams. By early 1982, Sealing and Kraft they're fighting and they're temporarily separated. In an effort to save their relationship, they started counseling on June 22nd, 1982. July 29th, 1982, a body of a 14-year-old was found, Raymond Davis. Not 40 feet away, they also found 16-year-old Robert Alveria Jr. Kraft is not to have known to kill again until November 1st, 1982. 24-year-old Irene Michael Lane. This body wasn't found until January of 1984. 4 weeks later, 26-year-old Brian Witcher was dumped from a moving vehicle on Interstate 5. December 3rd, 1982, 29-year-old carpenter named Anthony Joseph Silvera. December 5th, 1982, Kraft flew to Grand Rapids, Michigan on another business trip. 2 days after he arrived, Kraft encountered and murdered Dennis Alt and Christopher Schoenborn. Alt was 24, Schoenborn was 20, and they were cousins. On December 8th, Kraft returned to Portland and within 24 hours killed 19-year-old Lance Taggs. Oregon finally decided the killer must not be from Oregon, but must travel, most likely for work. Because now he's come several times, but they're so sporadic. So they sent word to other states to see if any unsolved murders matched their California counties were swift to respond. So they're like, wait, we think we know not who he is, but that this is happening. Then Kraft took a small break until January 27, 1983. 21-year-old Eric Herbert Church. February 12th, two men were killed, 18-year-old Jeffrey Allen Nelson and 20-year-old Roger James Duvall Jr. Now, before we talk about his final murder and arrest, let us take note that I personally have lost count of how many bodies have been found, and in all murders, the men have these similarities. Now, each murder varied slightly, and not everyone was inflicted with the same wounds. Most men were drunk and had Valium in their system. Most victims were sodomized and emasculated. Most victims died of strangulation or asphyxiation, and more were tortured than not. Now, the final murder and arrest at 1:10 a.m. on May 14th, 1983, two California highway patrolmen observed a Toyota driving erratically on Interstate 5. They signaled for the driver to stop, thinking the driver is under the influence. The driver exited the vehicle and emptied a beer as he did so. The officer observed Kraft's jeans were unbuttoned. Kraft then failed a sobriety test. Kraft was arrested for drinking and driving. The other officer approached the car and observed a young man slumped over. He attempted to ruse the man and noticed his low body temperature. He checked the man's pulse and found him dead. Ligature marks were on his neck. His hands were bound with shoelaces and his genitalia were exposed. He was identified as Terry Lee Gamble, 25-year-old Marine. While Kraft was held for his drunk charge, they thoroughly searched the car and found alcohol, tranquilizers, various prescription drugs, and stimulants. Blood, envelope containing more than 50 photos of young men in pornographic poses, either asleep or dead, in a 3-ring binder. Contained handwritten list of 61 coded notations. The search of Kraft's home revealed evidence including clothes, victim's personal possessions, fibers on the rug, matched victim Scott Hughes. The couch was also in some of the pics found. Roll of film with pics of Eric Church and Roger Duvall. The coded list of 61 entries is believed to be Kraft's victims. Some entries indicate torture or mutilation inflicted, and or last location they were seen or where the body was dumped. 4 entries indicated double murders. The scorecard lists 65 to 67 victims. On May 16th, 1983, Kraft was formally charged with the murder of Gamble. By September, they had interviewed over 700 witnesses, gathered more than 250 pieces of physical exhibits. This evidence points towards another 15 homicides committed between 72 and 83. He was formally charged with these 15 murders along with the 2 counts of sodomy and one of emasculation. Edward Daniel Moore, Kevin Clark Bailey, Ronnie Jean Wimby, Keith Devin Crotwell, Mark Howard Hall, Scott Michael Hughes, Ronald Jared Young, Richard Allen Keith, Keith Arthur Killingbill, Michael Joseph Interbenton, Donnie Harold Crizell, Robert Wyatt Loggins Jr., Eric Herbert Church, Roger James Duvall Jr., Jeffrey Allen Nelson, Terry Lee Gamble. Trial began September 26, 1988. Orange County was where it was held. Before Judge Donald A. McCartan, almost 160 witnesses were called for the prosecution, with over 1,000 exhibits. The defense was made up of alibis claiming Kraft is innocent and that he was upstanding and hardworking member of society. The trial lasted 13 months. It was Orange County's most expensive in history. On May 12, 1989, Kraft was found guilty on all charges. During the sentencing portion from June to August, they entered more evidence connecting Oregon and Michigan murders. The defense was that it was highly speculative and then tried to enter evidence of brain scans showing frontal lobe damage, proving Kraft couldn't control his impulses. His friends and family being in disbelief shows how good of a salesman he is. I mean, his family and friends are like, even his ex-lover that he wasn't with, like everybody was on his side saying he did not do this. He's an upstanding citizen. He's not abusive. He's not this. He's not that. Like, they truly believed he did not do this. On August 11th, 1989, the jury rendered a verdict of death. The sentence was upheld in 2000. It is still believed some of the murders couldn't have been done alone, but to this day, it hasn't been proven that he had any help. As of 2025, he still sits on death row.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a lot of information, but
A
it was
lot.
a lot of victims.
A lot. Oh my gosh. Well, after all of that, let us finish this off with a little of the unexplained. So, California has what's called the Dark Watchers. The Dark Watchers are a local legend, primarily in the Santa Lucia Mountains in California. They're tall, shadowy figures that can appear in the mountaintops, particularly in like the late afternoon and twilight hours. The legend has oral roots starting with the local Native American tribes, described as tall, sometimes up to 10 feet, wearing long cloaks, wide brim hats, and walking sticks. Often seen as like a silhouette against the sunset and appear to be watching, like the scene below from the mountains. They mysteriously appear and then they just disappear. The natives were so intrigued by these watchers that they're actually like depicted in different cave paintings and like pictographs and everything.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of these? Anyone? If so, let us know.
We would like to thank you for joining us in our discoveries of California this week. Please join us next week while we travel to Colorado. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our adventures next week into killers, psychos, and the unexplained.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye bye!